Break down, we'll go very one-on-one here. A 5-day notice. When you are delivering a 5-day notice, what is it and what are you really doing to those? What are you saying, I guess, in that
And
message?
do you have to physically deliver it to the
Yeah, I
tenant?
was going to go on that too. Like talk about
Yep.
process server versus physically versus posting. Give us kind of that spiel.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So we refer very generally to a 5-day notice as a termination notice for non-payment. So when your tenant hasn't paid and you want to terminate their tenancy for non-payment, you have to serve them with a written notice. We use 5-day because Illinois statute says the minimum amount of time you can give a tenant to pay is 5 days. I always caution clients, landlords who use a lease that might be off the internet. It's not one of the standard leases. They're, multi-state and they're using their lease from Indiana in Illinois. Leases that are not in compliance with Illinois law could say you have to give your tenant 7 days or 10 days to pay. Some even say 3 days. But it's 5 days in Illinois unless your lease says more. So just be careful. Always look at your lease and make sure you can use a 5-day notice. I'm going to use that term just because it's the standard, what we talk about in Illinois, but I'm throwing that caveat out there. So a 5-day notice is going to tell the tenant how much they owe and give them 5 days to pay in full. You got to have the tenant's name. You got to have their full address, write the word street or avenue, make sure the unit number and the zip code all included and have the proper address in there. You want the amount that's due through the date you sign that notice. So make sure the full amount of rent is due. In Chicago and Cook County, you should only include rent. You should not include late fees or repair charges or utilities unless your lease says that those amounts are considered additional rent. Judges do not like to see landlords throwing in every different amount due. They only want to see rent. So that's a little lease provision tip there. Your lease should say that everything that the tenant has to pay is considered additional rent. And then you can throw everything in the kitchen sink into your 5-day notice. So we've got tenant name, full address, the amount that's due. It has to tell them that they have 5 days to pay. Then there is some statutory language in Illinois that says to the effect of only full payment will waive the landlord's right to pursue termination of your tenancy. But it's very specific statutory language that has to be included. So don't pull a termination notice off of a website for California notices. It's got to have this Illinois statute language in there. And it has to be dated and signed by the landlord. Now, there's some other technical issues that tenants' rights attorneys sometimes bring up. I've had arguments that the 5-day notice should include where payment can be made. We have generally overcome those arguments, and the judge agrees that if the tenant has been paying rent regularly, they should know where to pay the rent. So just be careful. Another argument that has been made is whether the person signing is actually the landlord or an agent. Is the landlord identified on the 5-day notice? We have overcome those arguments as well, but it may be good under the landlord signature line to either put ABC Management as agent for owner or the ownership ABC Property LLC as the landlord's name. So just a few technical requirements. So that's what needs to be included in the 5-day. Really, really important. I'm glad you guys brought up service, because service of a 5-day notice in Illinois, especially in Chicago, is really, really important. So Illinois statute says you have to serve by personally handing it to someone, either the tenant or any occupant who is 13 years or older, sending it by certified mail, or posting on the door if no one is actually in possession of the unit. So let's talk about those first two. You can hand it to the tenant. That is the best way, absolutely, to serve a 5-day notice. You can hand it to any occupant who lives there who's age 13 or older. So, if the tenant has a 13-year-old son, you can hand that 5-day notice to the 13-year-old. Certified mail. Judges want to see a green card with a legible signature of the tenant. Those are very hard to come by these days. Not only is it really difficult to get the green card back, when you get it back, there's some scribble on it and you absolutely cannot make out who signed it. And the judge is going to say that's not proper service. Last is posting. And this is the one that gets landlords all the time. I hear, it says I can post it. No, it says you can only post if no one is actually in possession. So the statute requirement is that you can only post if the tenants have abandoned the unit, but they left a bunch of stuff in there and you want to be, really safe and go the eviction route, but they're not living in there. Then you can post it. Otherwise, you have to try to personally serve the tenant. In Chicago, I've had judges say, you could sit outside that unit 24/7. I bet you'd get him. Can't post it. Need to personally serve it. The judges are really, really sticklers for personal service. So our general rule of thumb that we tell clients is 8 to 12 attempts at personal service. Write down the date and time that you made those attempts and what happened. You heard the TV inside, nobody came to the door. The tenant's car's in the driveway, nobody came to the door. Dog barking, nobody came to the door. After those 8 to 12 attempts, then post it, mail it regular mail. If you have an email address for the tenant, email it to the tenant as well. Then from our office, we have our clients sign what's called an affidavit of due diligence, where we are having the client testify in an affidavit as to all the different service attempts they tried. When we do that, we've been very successful. We have not had a case dismissed for posting when our client has followed all of those rigorous requirements, but it is time consuming. But I will tell you, absolutely in Chicago, if you post a notice without attempting personal service, the judges will dismiss your case. As soon as they catch it, they will dismiss your case. They want to see the notice before they enter an eviction order, and they will catch it, and your case will be dismissed. So that posting gets landlords. But in Chicago and Cook County, make sure you are attempting personal service at least 8 to 12 times before you post.